Good morning and afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to share the results from 50 discussions that NelsonHall undertook with executives in major retail banking, capital markets and insurance companies about the current status and future expectations of their operations business processes. In particular, we asked executives about the performance of their current as-is operations and the key improvements and benefits they'd seek from transformed operations, then the approaches and technologies that are required for process transformation, and then the characteristics that they would seek in a supplier to assist them with this operational transformation. And in addition, finally, can't ignore COVID-19 at the moment, so let's take a quick look at the impact that the pandemic is having on operational transformation trends and requirements. So what's the state of play within as-is processes within the BFSI sector? Which areas are perceived to be higher performing and which lower performing? The figures on this chart, and actually it's the same on many of my charts, show the proportions of executives that are highly satisfied with each of a number of characteristics of their current operations, or a number that think a particular characteristic is important. So enterprises in the BFSI sector have traditionally achieved a sound level of straight-through processing and regulatory compliance. A lot of investment's taken place in these two areas over the years, and executives are reasonably confident in their ability to manage risk, another area of high investment in your sector. In addition, the BFSI sector has been in the forefront of industries in terms of applying automation, with over half of RPA deployment taking place in this sector, and some organizations deploying many thousands of bots. Nonetheless, current systems and RPA only take you so far, and BFSI executives perceive their organizations to still have some way to go in terms of reducing the level of exceptions being generated by their current operations, which typically currently require quite high levels of human involvement in judgment-based processing. At the same time, there's often considerable scope for enhancing the level of predictive or prescriptive insight being generated by these operations. And this is increasingly important. We're now in very turbulent and uncertain times, so the level of business insight coming out of operations is becoming of much higher importance than in more stable times. As you'd expect, there are some differences within the BFSI sector itself, with insurance executives typically much more concerned about their capabilities in risk reduction and regulatory compliance, and executives in capital markets and commercial banking more concerned with their abilities in areas like straight-through processing. So, big question. Given this profile of current operational performance, is operational transformation still perceived to be relevant? And what are the key benefits that your peers want from transformed operations? Well, more than 3/4 of BFSI executives felt that operational transformation in the form of innovative process and business models was still highly important to their organizations. Digital and operational transformation might have been around for a while, but they're intensifying in importance rather than going away. The benefits that executives are seeking from transformed operations are moderately predictable. I've separated them into improving efficiency and improving effectiveness. But as we all know, these are highly coupled and effectively different sides of the same coin. So if you reduce error rates and levels of error handling, then you tend to improve the customer experience. And if you increase levels of straight-through processing, then you tend to drastically reduce the cost of operations. So all these things are very highly interlinked. So no real surprises here in the benefits sought. The BFSI sector has typically done better than most in achieving straight-through processing, but there's still considerable scope for further improvement, and this remains a high priority. It's now, as I said before, we've done so much with RPA, but it's increasingly about employing more cognitive technologies to reduce error rates, levels of exception handling, and to incorporate ongoing process learning. Two characteristics that, if not unique to BFSI, are strongly pronounced in the sector are Improving the handling of low-value transactions. Now, this is an area where organisations typically can't afford to deploy lots of expensive personnel, but you still want to check the validity of transactions and detect, say, fraudulent activity. So these need to be largely straight-through processing, but straight-through processing with a strong level of judgment applied. Secondly, in much of the BFSI sector, being able to assess underwriting risk, select desirable applications from customers and approve them rapidly is key to the level of new business won. And new business models and cognitive technologies can substantially speed up this process. So despite the progress already made in the sector, there remains a considerable need to transform operations across each of banking, capital markets, and insurance. So what are the key philosophies when transforming operations to achieve these benefits? Firstly, it goes without saying that you need to focus on key business outcomes. While cost reduction is a no-brainer in most instances, enhancing the customer experience is also invariably important. These two tend to apply in the vast majority of processes. After that, the ambition tends to be process-specific, so maybe the ambition is to reduce the level of fraud. Secondly, transformation, if it is to deliver a step change in operations and go beyond tweaking current processes, does require a strong element of design thinking and fundamentally rethinking the target process. Needless to say, it's dangerous to be too simplistic though, and even though you're looking to reinvent a process, it's important to have a thorough and deep understanding of the industry and the target process area. Technology on its own is unlikely to do the trick. Finally, what's come much more to the fore in recent years is the adoption of an agile approach. This was initially applied mainly to IT with the arrival of DevOps and Scrum teams, etc. But in many ways, the concept is equally applicable to operations, where organizations now need to adapt to a changing environment and take advantage of the possibilities created by changing and emerging technologies much faster than in the past. So how are organizations going about developing transformed operations? There are three key themes in execution. Firstly, putting the customer experience at the forefront. And nowadays, and increasingly so in the current environment, this means increasing the level of digital and mobile usage within customers. It's always been high in BFSI, but it needs to get even higher. Secondly, adopting a machine-first approach. So in recent years, there's been a real change in mindset from using automation to tidy up human-centric approaches to designing processes with automation in mind. With automation, for want of a better word, going well beyond traditional RPA to handle what were formerly human-centric, judgment-based process. Thirdly, and this is important, though arguably at an earlier stage of development, starting to develop ecosystem approaches and incorporating services and information from outside the organization. So in terms of technologies, clearly digitization is key, with new processes avoiding paper documents as much as possible, together with analytics and machine learning in their various forms to handle judgment-based processes and develop both process and business insight. And APIs and microservices are key to achieving operational agility and connecting to wider ecosystems, both internally, say in the form of legacy systems, and externally, both to things like AI algorithms and to third-party services. So what factors are important when selecting a supplier to assist in operational transformation? In general, it's important that suppliers have a broad range of expertise across both process reimagination and implementation. Ideally, it's a joint discussion from the start, with both yourselves and the vendor bringing your respective domain and process understanding and ideas to the table. Clearly, from what we've discussed earlier, it's important for the vendor to be able to make a contribution to the design of the customer experience, with high capability in conversational and user experience design and implementation, and of course knowledge of the application of machine learning and its various derivatives. Which takes us on to increasing operational agility, both in terms of scaling operations and even more importantly, in terms of taking advantage of new technologies and applications as they emerge and being able to switch those in and out in an agile fashion. Here, cloud apps and infrastructure capability important, but also another trend over the past few years has been the emergence of specific use case transformation solutions. So vendors are now building new digital process models, typically incorporating machine learning and a mix of digital technologies. These typically start as client-specific use cases, but have now been refined and packaged for more general use. And to give you some examples, these are things like KYC and onboarding new customers in retail banking, trade processing, where there's a case study from Norbert later, and fund reconciliation in areas like capital markets, and underwriting prioritization and commercial auto triage have been popular areas in the insurance sector. And of course, in the adoption of any new digital technology, cybersecurity capability is another of those things that won't go away. Every time you think it's reached a peak of importance, it actually steps up another gear. And this is especially so in the BFSI sector. So what impact is COVID-19 having on operational transformation? Has it made it all go away, or what's it done to it? Now, as you know, COVID-19 is leading to a step change in the use of digital in many industries. And as you can imagine, we've done quite a few surveys since all this began to assess its impact. And I've yet to hear any individual company say that digital transformation has become less important. The vast majority said that COVID-19 strongly increases the importance of digital transformation. And there's a perfect storm of reasons why this is the case. With the possible exception of the pharmaceuticals industry, every sector is potentially looking to cut its operational costs this year. At the same time, operational scalability and resilience have become major themes. Business volumes and the shape of the recovery have got a high degree of certainty, and enterprises potentially need to be able to scale down in the short term and then scale up rapidly if and when the upturn takes place. And they don't even know, we don't even know that it's going to be a V shape. It could be a W shape or I don't know if a Z shape is possible, but the shape of that recovery and the pattern of business we're going to see over the next year or so is pretty ill-defined right now. So both this potential need to quickly change the scale of operations and the need for operational resilience, if we get another lockdown, say, also means there's pressure to reduce human dependencies where possible. And it's a no-brainer that customers have become even more dependent on digital interfaces. And finally, forecasting has become very tricky in the current business environment. So any business insight you can get from operations is extremely desirable. As a result, agile and machine-first operational transformation has become even more important, not something to ignore while you handle the BCP requirements of COVID. As the commentators keep saying, COVID-19 is driving the level of change that would normally take 5 years into a period of months. And now we've a couple of poll questions to see what extent you're thinking along these lines. So if I can pass you back to Sally.
I'm right here. Thank you so much. And what you're saying is so important. It's exactly what we're hearing from all of our shared service leaders, the importance of that operational agility and providing insight across the organization. Thank you. So yes, I've got a couple of poll questions for you that we'd love you to answer, just to get a better sense of what you guys are doing around this topic. So what you need to do is just click on the option that best suits you and press submit. So our first question is, what impact has COVID-19 had on the need for operational transformation within your organization? So that's reduce need, no change, or increase need. So you just click on that and press submit. That's what impact has COVID-19 had on the need for operational transformation within your organization. Click on reduced need, no change, or increased need. I'll give you a few seconds to answer that before I go on to the answers. I should have some music here, really. Next time. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's have a look what you put. Right. Really, really powerful. I know Mohan, our next speaker, is going to touch on these, but that's fascinating to see. 83% increased need for transformation. So important. The second question we've got for you is a little bit longer, and that's what impact has COVID-19 had on the importance of decoupling processing volumes from headcount within your operations? So do we think there's a reduced need for that, no change, or increased importance? So that question is, what impact has COVID-19 had on the importance of decoupling processing volumes from headcount within your operations? Reduced need, no change, or increased importance? Make your answer now. Brilliant. I'm going to carry on to the next slide. Let's see what you put. Increased importance again. Fantastic. Right, I'm going to hand over to our next speaker, Mohan, who's going to talk through the answers and just lead us into the next part of the presentation. Over to you, Mohan.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you. Am I audible, Sally?
You very much are audible, yes.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. John, the results came out to be much more than what we expected, isn't it? Indeed, I definitely think it's all the more relevant to talk about operations transformation during these unprecedented COVID times. Everybody, I think, saw the poll. It's extremely important to do two things. One, ensure that operations transformation is undertaken at the earliest, and more importantly, decouple it from the human centricity. So the poll results speak. See, at TCS, we have been adapting and partnering with our customers a digital-first approach. Right? I definitely think with this pandemic, it has got accelerated in pace, definitely. And most notably in the business process services area, which is the focus of our discussion today. I would flip to the slides now to show you some quick insights. Before I talk about what you see on the slide, it's important to note that at TCS, we stopped using the term business process services, or BPS, for about 2 years now. We adopted the nomenclature called cognitive business operations that signifies the digital-first approach that we have. So let me take you through the point of view, the framework, the approach adapted by TCS towards transforming business process services into cognitive business operations for BFSI sector in focus, definitely. So what you see on the screen here is what we call as a Business 4.0 framework at TCS. Because just listen to John's few snippets of his speech. It is extremely important to have an organizational digital-first strategy before transforming the business process services into cognitive business operations. That's what we are going to talk about. And with this chart on the screen, I'm going to take you through that. We call this whole framework as Business 4.0, as I was saying. It has certain technology pillars for organizations to adapt and certain behavioral characteristics. We can call them P4 and B4, if you will, 4 pillars and 4 behaviors. You see them surrounding the outer circle here on the graphic. The 4 pillars are agile, automation, cloud, intelligent analytics using AI, and together all of them, all these 4 pillars, make up what we call as the digital spine of any organization. The digital spine helps to pursue and, of course, to realize the behavioral characteristics that you see here, such as mass personalization, leveraging ecosystems, unlocking exponential value, and, of course, being able to embrace risk. In other words, being able to remain purpose-driven, resilient enough to embrace risk, and be adaptable to changing circumstances. I would think this last point on embracing risk and being resilient is now very much applicable in the current uncertain times of COVID. That's very, very important. So with a digital foundation such as this, it becomes easier to transform the business process services into what we call as cognitive operations. Let's see in the next slides, as I move to the next slide, how we go about doing it. So here in this slide, we take a look at the evolution of BPS operating model across the time scale of 4 horizons. Horizon 4 here is the one derived out of the Business 4.0 approach that we just saw on the previous chart. Let's take a look at the evolution of this model. A decade ago, I would think the lead solution levers used were essentially lift and shift, labor arbitrage, later perhaps bringing in process standardization, process maturity, SLA-based approach, and then to manage services and value-based models, right? And currently in Horizon 4, we see cognitive operations giving significant booster further to transformation. Please note, this is an important point, that the timelines indicated on the chart denote the essential leading characteristics of the operating model at the time, and do not mean that those characteristics are not required now or not relevant now. They could still be used partly or as a whole, wherever applicable. As we saw in John's presentation, organizations across the BFSI industry, and I would agree with him, have reasonably made use of RPA and automation, and have also been investing a lot in other levers such as standardization, fundamentally reimagining or rethinking the business processes. It has given significant gain over the years to various organizations. But what we are looking at now is leapfrogging it further. So cognitive operations approach is going to take it one notch up and is going to accomplish 2 objectives. One, to scale up the transformation even further, and of course, to execute it rapidly at scale. So the characteristics of the cognitive operations you see on the chart in the lower right side, such as AI, ML, analytics, and wherever possible, cloud hosting of the cognitive solutions, and the engagement models that you see out there becoming more and more gain share, BPaaS, all are characteristics of the cognitive approach. So undoubtedly, the benefits are significant of converting from BPS to cognitive operations. But there are 2 questions that are often asked. One, how do you devise the cognitive solutions quickly? Because speed is the essence. And second, how do you deploy the cognitive solutions rapidly so that BPS, standard plain old BPS, gets converted into cognitive operations? The second part has an offshoot question as well. Once cognitive solutions are deployed and they make the operations less human-centric, whatever is minimal operations that is left out as human-centric, how do you train them very quickly? So the analogy people give is, it's like an automobile manufacturing plant where you see huge robotic arms being programmed and controlled by just one person. So in the next slide, I'm going to talk about how you devise the solutions quickly. But let me answer how to deploy quickly. At TCS, we have embraced Agile in business operations successfully. There is a 7-tenet-based framework for TCS called TCS Agile for Operations. We basically have been putting it to use very successfully, I would think. And we are seeing the ability to deploy the cognitive solutions pretty fast. Let me now flip to the question of how do we devise the cognitive solutions quickly, as you see on this chart here. While robotic process automation was popular in the past, and to some extent address the short-term requirements by mimicking the human actions through various tools, I would think the RPA approach had its own limitations. Not only did it create, I would think, more problems on the change management, it also needed to be always done from scratch for every functionality. That's exactly, I think, where the cognitive asset-led strategy that you see on the screen would score over it. With proper use of this approach, we have tried to drive out this strategy. Let me point to the chart here and explain a little bit. In the bottom of the chart, you would see the foundational blocks, right? The cognitive enablers that you see out there. These are analogies to the Lego building blocks that you play out with to create forms and shapes. They are built to fit into external applications through APIs and adapters, and then operate most efficiently for the functions that they deliver. These foundational blocks or cognitive enablers are already built at TCS for various processes. We refer to them using code names here. You see Jarvis, which is for cognitive OCR, that treats handwritten documents as well as printed documents. You see Microflow, which is for a pre-built business workflow orchestration component, and various other ones for case management, productivity measurement, and so on. The most significant success factor of a cognitive business operations strategy is the ability to lay over the cognitive foundational blocks a very tailor-made contextual domain layer. Because unless you train the solutions for a particular context, such as mortgages or a capital markets process, and within that sub-processes, they are as good as any technology. So we bring in the domain layer here. Once you have the foundational blocks and the contextualization, they are then put through various frameworks you see here, such as PIPS, CJAS, which is Customer Journey as a Service. And depending on the purpose for which they are developed, they basically render the service. The result is you have a well-trained, context-specific, domain-specific, deployable cognitive solutions. They are further elevated into cognitive assets, as you see in the upper layers, and then business solutions if you package them in permutations and combinations. The major advantage of this approach is you can choose from across the layers of components or package solutions, depending on the current digital footprint of your organization. There are definitely perhaps several investments already made around developing several of these features across the organization. You will not have to undo them. These assets or solutions would dovetail into those existing applications seamlessly. As a result, what you see on the right side, you would realize the ecosystem goals. The organizations would become increasingly agile, and you will have enriched customer experience, better risk management, I would think, and increased growth. I wouldn't go into a lot of scenarios, but I would want to tell you a couple of scenarios practically how you could make use of them. For example, across the globe, you saw in these recent unfortunate COVID times, governments have pitched in, rolled out the bailout programs. Take one example, SBA loan program in the US. For the loan forgiveness portion of that, we needed to build solutions which are very quickly deployable and also are transparent, and it needed to be done immediately. We used these opportunities to synthesize the entire solution through our components. So we had the workflow component, the microflow, which brought in the business workflow, and we had Jarvis, which is plugged in for document extraction, and we had the PPP, Paycheck Protection Program calculator, built using the control line business rule editor that you see at the lower right corner. And the solution got developed in a few days, actually, a few days. Let me pick one from the cognitive assets layer, which is mostly the contextualized, build package solution at the top. Trada, one of them, I think later on, Sriram and Norbert would speak about it as well. Trada is an end-to-end international trade operations transformation platform. It would actually help organizations to achieve various functions in trade finance area. And it is built using the cognitive solutions you see here, such as the cognitive OCR and other components as well. So in summary, if you adopt this approach, organizations, as it's depicted on the left side of the slide here, become higher in the machine-first quotient. We call it as MFDM, machine-first delivery model in TCS. Just a minute or so to show you a couple of quick case studies. Nothing in detail further. It's worthwhile to pay attention to the benefits out there. The first one is for a top US wholesale lender. The digital origination platform from the cognitive solution suite was implemented, and it transformed the business process services. The human centricity was reduced in BPS, and look at the results. The sales origination cost got reduced by 50%, loan approvals went up, became faster, and then you see loan conversions also improved there. Significant benefits out there. Similarly, a case that you see from the US investment bank. This is an interesting one. There was a lot of RPA investment that was done. It was a reconciliation function. Everybody was saying, hey, we have got 50%, 60% RPA gains. We questioned why the cognitive solutions using AI ML could not beat it and make it 100%. So this is a standing example of zero human centricity left out, 100% everything transformed using the cognitive levers. Quickly, the last ones. The first one is actually for a large bank in India. They wanted to outsource the BPS services. We brought in the automobile loan processing cognitive solution, and corresponding human centricity was dropped to a significantly minimal level. But that's not the important point. The important point is the scale and the throughput, the ability to consume more volumes. It is similar to the question that we saw in the poll. That increased significantly, 40 times increase, 40x increase in throughput, which is really significant. And again, another one for a multinational financial service firm in the UK. It's still ongoing, but you see that the processing times for the claims have gone down significantly. I would now pass it to my colleague Sriram to introduce one such partnership with the ABN Amro and talk about a success story and talk about that as well. Sriram, I pass it to you.
Thanks, Mohan. Sally, able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Sriram Manikam, responsible for the BFSI in Netherlands, operating out of Amsterdam. ABN Amro is my anchor account, and ABN Amro serves clients in retail, private, and corporate banking area. And they also provide clearing and custody services with primary focus in Northwest Europe. That's a little bit about what ABN AMRO as a bank does in this market. As TCS, we are the strategic partner for ABN AMRO. Interestingly, this is our 15th year of continued partnership. And we today serve for ABN AMRO from Netherlands and India, and do provide a wide spectrum of services covering the application development maintenance, the cognitive business operations. We also have our products with banks and the infrastructure services. So for this specific audience, let me dwell quickly into the cognitive business operation partnership. We, at ABN AMRO, started this journey in 2014. That's now 6 years. And we currently have quite a lot of business consultants across multiple business lines. You take it, it's capital markets, commercial, legal banking, and including compliance functions like the KYC. And over this period, we have worked very closely with the bank in delivering significant efficiency to a scale of about little over 30%, started with the levers of automation, lean strategy, and recently with deployment of cognitive assets and solutions. The operational or the cognitive business operation relationship of ABN AMRO, if I have to just take you back to the conversation Mohan had shared, the evolution is fairly similar to the horizon in which Mohan had indicated. We started in 2014 with a lift and shift of simpler operations, and then we slowly moved into the service level agreement-based operations, and then eventually took over quite a lot of complex activities such as capital market services and trade finance. And I'm happy to say we are right now in the horizon 4 of the journey with a significant amount of cognitive operations in play. So as we speak today, by and large, we have moved away from an FTE-based commercial models and more to a transaction-based model. And we are still incentivized through a gain share mechanism for transformation. And we are also at a point of time slowly looking and evolutionizing ourselves on a business process as a service model in some areas. So with that, I just wanted to let you know today we have invited Norbert from ABN Amro, who would speak briefly on the trade finance transformation that we have done, leveraging our cognitive assets and expertise in that domain. So thanks, Norbert, for taking time to be here with us. Floor is all yours now.
All right. Thank you, Sriram. Am I audible, just to make sure?
Yes, you are.
Very good. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to outline our experience over the last period. Maybe it's good to start with some facts about the trade finance business. Although I'm responsible for IT, it's always good for the audience to say something about what is trade finance all about. I think basically it's about financing trade, and it concerns both domestic and international trade transactions. And it requires, and most of the time it's about more international trade, of course, it requires a seller of goods and services as well as a buyer. That is, and I think if we give it a bit more detail, because I think it's good to understand what it is. While a seller can require the purchaser to prepay for goods shipped, the purchaser may wish to reduce risk by requiring the seller to document the goods that have been shipped. So banks may assist by providing various forms of support. For example, the letter of credit, and the banks may make a loan, for example, to the exporter on the basis of the exported contract. So it gives you a little bit, it's quite an interesting business. Until 2 years ago, I didn't know much about it. Now, fully involved in these initiatives, I know a lot more, and it's really interesting topic. But it's also a topic which is being run in a sort of old-fashioned way, and it doesn't concern the people that they're old-fashioned, but it concerns the business. It's full of documents and a lot of paper-based stuff. So if we go through the different challenges in these type of businesses, where ABN AMRO is, by the way, active in a couple of geographies, not only in the Netherlands, but also in Germany, UK, Hong Kong, Singapore, the US, and I probably forget 1 or 2 countries. So it's an international footprint we have. But the challenges are significant. For example, on the product side, we see that Basel IV is, for example, impacting the guarantee product, and a very important product in this type of business. And also, we see certain volumes also decreasing. At the same time, we also see that there's a big need for digitization and automation. Because of all these documents that are used in these processes, these are very labor intensive. Sometimes to process certain documents, to release certain funds, it takes about 30 to 60 minutes to do that. And that's because of those documents are not structured. They're different kind of formats. They come from all over the world, and it's very labor intensive to process them, but also the chance of making errors as well. So there's a great opportunity to pick that up. And I think what we have just heard over the last 45 minutes, especially these cognitive solutions, are able to help out in there, because this a traditional process redesign is not always the way to go there. Let me finish this slide. I think what we also see, we have in ABN AMRO a couple of business lines roughly using the same kind of systems, but still have their own processes. So we also see an opportunity to standardize those processes where we should standardize it. It's also finding a balance between customer intimacy and, of course, process efficiency. And our IT landscape in this area is also in a big need for a transformation. So that's also the challenge. So the key question we asked ourselves, knowing that this is a challenge, can we save costs while at the same time invest in automation and digitization, and especially, of course, in the journey of our customers, which are all over the world. So when we sort of agreed on what are the key problems, we also translated this into a number of themes where we organize ourselves. I won't discuss all of them. I think it's also sort of a lot of buzzwords, so the explanation is also important. But as I explained, the IT transformation is a major topic. And ABN AMRO has chosen to move away from an on-premise platform to an off-premise platform to Azure. And that will give us the possibility to increase our velocity, to make sure that we get the latest tooling and IT technology and that platform. So that's also a very important choice to move in that direction. The other hand, as we also talked about, is the process automation and digitization. As I explained, there's a lot of documents around, so a lot of people are working in this area, both in operations in India and in the Netherlands, but also the relationship managers. So here's a big opportunity to make this more simple with these solutions. At the same time, we see that, for example, blockchain initiatives, which are very well suited to be tried in these kind of areas, and although we're still in the beginning, those platforms are growing, and banks and big companies that are involved in these trade kind of processes are becoming enthusiastic about these blockchain kind of things. So we also need to make sure that we have APIs that are business driven and that can connect to these external platforms. And it's also, we need those APIs to connect to the current journeys of those customers, but let's then make them digital. And I think here is a great opportunity. We also talked about these COVID opportunity, so to say, which sounds a bit weird, by the way, but you understand what I'm saying. Where we now see that everybody working from home, which are people are used to send documents through email or through physical contact, it's not even possible in some cases anymore. So the urgency to digitize is becoming much more present than we had over the last 10, 20 years. So we're structuring a program along these themes, and that's where we are. And what we did last year is we have, as Sridhar already explained, we have TCS as our strategic partner. And we talked to them, and we knew that they have quite an impressive presence in trade finance, not only with regard to IT, but also with regard to outsourcing a lot of these business processes with regard to trade to their operation and business centers in India. So we had a look, and we were quite enthusiastic about this. Explained our case and the challenges we have. Together with their consultants, we started to assess basically our current operation to make sure that what are the opportunities. And we're very surprised by the outcome. And it's not that the outcome itself was sort of, hey, this is completely different than we thought. No, it was really structured. It was really to the point. And it could immediately be connected to the IT solutions that TCS themselves had or their partners have. So when we went through this journey, we really looked at their different solutions, and we also concluded at the end of last year in which specific areas we would like to start investing to make sure that on the digital journey side we're going to improve. So, for example, we did a proof of concept with one of their cognitive solutions, where we make sure that we could train the system, teach the system basically, or refine the algorithm to make sure that, for example, 12 different fields from a paper-based document could be picked up from an unstructured document, and that through machine learning we could figure out how to reduce the manual work, and to make sure that by scanning the documents, identifying those 12 fields, and make sure that those 12 fields were inserted into our own trade systems fully automatically. And I think the POC itself was very successful. We gave the system 1,000 different kind of documents. And of course, the outcome was, of course, that we would like to have is that almost 100% would be sort of confidence level. That's almost impossible. We know but now around 90%. So that POC was successful, and now we should bring that forward to the next phase, and that's where we currently are. But before we go to the next steps on that POC, I think it's also good that we made sure that we looked into the TRADA framework of TCS. It was already briefly touched upon in the previous presentation, and a lot of solutions in this suite. We started especially on the left side, on the end customer, because we want to make sure that there we have the biggest benefits. And in this process review, we looked at the different kind of solutions that were part of this framework. And I think that was really helpful in making the right choices. For some choices, we already working on some areas, and we did not use the specific solutions that were offered. For others, we choose immediately, okay, this is what we need. And for example, in the back office side, we're currently discussing a couple of these solutions. One of the things that was also for us an important factor in moving ahead was the interesting combination of business process and IT. And usually, of course, IT and business operations work together, but we never had a setup, also not really in the Netherlands, where we could sit together. So the idea is to bring a lot of operational work to India. There already is some footprint. We want to increase that. But we created a floor in Mumbai where you see in these photographs both the IT setup and the operation setup. And why is that so important? We believe that if you want to teach your systems that using these cognitive solutions, you still need the people to make sure that those systems are properly trained. It's not an IT solution in itself. You need people from the floor that know the business and that know the processes to make sure. So why not make sure that they are in a very close to each other, so that they can meet each other at the coffee machine, that they have joint meeting rooms, and that they can talk about improvement. So what we're doing in the next couple of months, of course, we make sure that we are going to implement our first solutions, especially in this document capture and scanning area where we retrieve the data from the documents. We also see still an opportunity to merge and enhance our processes. But the other thing that's also interesting is that by making sure that we can collect all the data from the document next to the current data we're already having, we make sure that we have a big data lake with all kinds of data which we never had before, because it was data which was either on the document and or with the person that was processing it, or maybe with the relationship manager. And by doing this, we basically enrich our data lake with all these new data, and we can use it for different kind of purposes. We can use it to have a different conversation with our clients, because we have information about their business which we can share with them. We can use the information to further enhance our processes, etc., etc. So that's a big opportunity. We're a little bit at the beginning there, but we believe that is absolutely the way forward. So I explained to you a little bit about the use case in the trade finance area, where we work together on a strategic level with TCS, but converting it to a more tactical and operational collaboration, where we believe that this setup and compilation is going to bring us the value to make sure that we enhance our digital journey for our customers, and at the same time lower the costs and make sure that the efficiencies we retrieve in the area, that we can invest them again in new tooling to further enhance our processes with these cognitive solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Norbert, for that presentation. That was really, really interesting. We hear so much about the data analytics part and how people are still struggling with it after so much time that we've been talking about it. So it's really good to hear that what you've been doing and that you've been kind of creating benefits from that. I want to invite everyone to put your questions into the Q&A box. We've got 5 minutes for them, so pop your questions into the Q&A box and we'll endeavour to get those answered. The first one that I just wanted to ask, we've had a few come in already. I'm going to direct to John. So the first question is, what is the most important leadership skill that you need to develop during this kind of digital transformation? Any tips for people that are looking to lead teams through the digital transformation? John?
Okay. I guess change management is an awful large part of this. So,
I know this is probably a presentation in itself. Sorry, I've asked for a lot
several
of tips
presentations in itself. But I think really, bouncing off what Norbert said, the key thing in these really is getting IT and operations together. And we've seen, going back to all the waves of RPA years ago, just what those battles could be and how destructive they could be. So, yes, you always need the senior leadership backing, but you need to bring, the operations side and the IT together. And then, as always with any of this sort of initiative, certainly if it's in-house, it's really showing how that change is actually going to enhance people's working lives rather than destroy them. So, I mean, at a simplistic level, communication is always absolutely critical. The other things are really, are back to the usuals in terms of, the customer experience or the parties on the other end of the trade finance, understanding what their journeys look like, how they think, absolutely essential. And, just really working out the possibilities of these new cognitive technologies. Yeah,
100%. Having people, bringing them along the stakeholder journey is so important. That's great advice. Thank you. The next question I've got comes up, and this is comes through for Norbert. We have a question on your data analytics that you spoke about. Obviously, you've been using data analytics within the organization to great effect. This person asks, what's been the best thing that you've done with your data? What's provided the most hard benefits?
Oh, that's a very good question. And I wish I could answer that very clearly. I think we come from a sort of an area where we have typical all these reports delivered through a sort of micro-strategy kind of solution where you can look at certain standard reports. And I think we're at the moment that we don't want those standard reports anymore. We want people from the business that have the capabilities to explore that data with tooling that is where you don't have to be an ITer. And I think we're in the transition of doing that. And so we're making sure that we expose that data in an architecture which can be approached by tooling, which can be used by the business. And of course, there's differentiation between very difficult analytical tools and simple tools. But I think by letting people explore the data themselves, it will give them more insights than just using standard reports. But in all honesty, we have been very busy over the last 2 years to make sure that we get all the data from our sources, from our source systems, and to make them comprehensive. And I think that has been the biggest job so far. And I think now we're at the moment where we can sort of leverage what we have done over the last 2 years by providing the tools that give you far more insights than we have today. So we're sort of halfway the journey. A lot of underground work has been done, but now the next phase is comes out. I think, let's say in a half year time, I will be able to give a better answer to your question.
You come back and speak again then. We book him already, guys, don't worry. Cool. Another question's come through for John. Gulshan asks, he says, very good overview and take on how the organization's looking at automation on a forward basis. He asks, do you also see the trend to pick up certain automation tools or frameworks which are more amenable to remote deployment?
Yes, I mean, I guess good question, a very topical one. I mean, I think the virtue of a lot of this is because you are uncoupling the person from the process to a large extent. You're doing that machine first approach, and making it as cognitive and digital as you can. Then that is more suited. Well, that is very suited to remote. Now, I don't know, whether the question remote means work from home, or does it mean sort of offshore? I think what we're seeing, certainly with the pandemic, is actually, yes, okay, there's a big shift to work from home from wherever. But we're not seeing a big change in shoring. The onshore is staying onshore and staying on remote. It isn't leaving because of COVID or anything like that. Not sure if that answers the question, but yes, I mean, you want all this stuff to be usable. You want operational resilience. So that basically means that the people who are still on the end of it need to be able to do it from anywhere.
Yeah, 100%. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. I'm really sorry. I know we didn't get much chance to ask questions, but there was so much information in that presentation. It was really, really fantastic. Thank you. To everyone else listening, there are lots of resources that you can download on both TCS Work and NelsonHall. And if you didn't get your questions answered, I will be sending them on to the team to reply to you. So don't worry too much about that. I just want to say thank you for all of our speakers for taking the time to put together their presentations and deliver it today. It's really great that we're able to connect on a virtual stage like this. And please have a safe evening, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally.